Welcome back, everyone. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. I'm going to be sharing some really exciting news that I know you'll enjoy. So let's get started. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about marine construction is that equipment is just equipment. They see a crane sitting on a barge or a workboat moving through a job site, and they think it's basically the same as any other construction project, but it's not. In marine construction, equipment is everything. The equipment you choose can determine whether a project makes money or loses money, whether work moves efficiently or constantly struggles, and sometimes whether a job succeeds or fails altogether. And what most people don't realize is marine equipment isn't just expensive to buy. It's expensive to move. It's expensive to maintain. It's expensive to insure. And expensive every single day it sits idle. That's a side people usually never see. In the last episode, I talked about how marine construction is completely different from land construction. And one of the biggest reasons for that is the equipment. Because on land, most contractors can transport equipment directly to a project. But on water, everything changes. Now you're dealing with floating platforms, water depth, tides, currents, weather, and access limitations that can completely affect how work gets done. One thing people outside the industry often don't understand is that marine construction equipment works as a system. It's just not one crane or one barge or one boat. Everything depends on everything else. You may have a crane capable of doing the work, but if the barge isn't large enough or stable enough, the crane becomes limited. You may have the right barge, but if the tugboat can't position it properly in current or wind, production slows down. You may have all the right equipment, but if the water depth changes too much with tide movement, now you have another problem. That's why marine construction requires so much planning and coordination, because every piece affects the next piece. Most people think marine construction equipment as large visible stuff, things like cranes, pile driving rigs, barges, excavators, workboats. And yes, those are all major parts of the industry. But what people don't see is all the support equipment behind those operations. Anchoring systems, fuel transfers, material barges, spud barges, crew boats, generators, rigging equipment, survey equipment, all the smaller support systems that keep the operation moving. Because without those, the large equipment can't work efficiently. One of the first major costs on any marine project starts before the work even begins, and that's called mobilization. And this is something a lot of people outside the industry underestimate. Moving marine equipment is not simple. You're not just loading up on a trailer and driving to a job site. Sometimes barges have to travel long distances. Sometimes cranes have to be transported in sections. Sometimes boats have to be relocated from completely different regions. And every step of that process costs money. Fuel, transportation, permits, crew, time. And once the equipment begins moving toward a project, the financial clock starts running. This is one of the biggest themes that you will probably hear me talk about throughout this channel. What people don't see. Because when someone looks at a marine construction project, they usually see the finished structure. Things like the finished dock, the marina, the seawall, the bridge. But they don't see the massive amount of equipment and coordination it took to build it. And they definitely don't see what happens behind the scenes when something goes wrong. I've seen situations where a contractor brought equipment to a job, and once they got there, they realized that the setup wasn't right for the conditions. Maybe the crane didn't have enough reach. Maybe the barge size wasn't ideal. Maybe the site access was tighter than expected. Now all of a sudden, production slows down. Work becomes inefficient, and costs start climbing because in marine construction, small problems can become expensive problems very quickly. Especially once equipment is ready to mobilize or already mobilized. Another thing people outside the industry really think about is equipment downtime. On social media or online videos, you usually only see equipment working. You see a crane swinging. You see piles being driven. You see progress happening. But what you don't see are the days when equipment is sitting still because something broke. And in marine construction, breakdowns can become very expensive very fast because repairing equipment on the water is completely different from repairing equipment on land. Sometimes parts have to be brought in from other cities or states. Sometimes mechanics have to travel to the site. Sometimes weather delays repairs even longer. And while all that is happening, the project schedule keeps moving. The crew is still there. The equipment is still costing money, and pressure starts building quickly. That's one reason experienced contractors become very serious about maintenance. Preventative maintenance in this industry is not optional, it's survival. Because one unexpected breakdown at the wrong time can affect the entire project. Now, another thing that separates marine construction from land construction is how much the weather affects operations. Wind matters, currents matter, wave conditions matter, tides matter, and those things can change quickly. You might have equipment perfectly positioned in the morning, and by the afternoon, conditions have shifted enough to affect the entire operation. That's why experience matters so much in this business. Because experienced people learn how to anticipate conditions before they become problems. One thing I always tell people is this: never evaluate a marine project on a calm, sunny day. Go look at it when conditions are rough and tides are low. That's when you learn what the site is really capable of. That's when you find out what equipment challenges you may actually face, because the water, it always tells the truth eventually. Now, let's talk about something people really underestimate: the cost of owning marine equipment. Marine equipment is expensive even when it's working, but it can become very expensive when it's not working. You still have insurance, maintenance costs, repairs, storage, crew costs, fuel, inspections, financing. And unlike some industries, marine equipment operates in one of the harshest environments possible: saltwater, corrosion, constant exposure, heavy loads, continuous wear and tear. That environment is tough on machinery, and maintenance becomes a huge part of staying operational. This is also where I've seen many newer companies struggle. They buy equipment too early, or they buy equipment for one project without thinking long term. Sometimes they underestimate maintenance costs. Sometimes they overestimate how often the equipment will actually stay utilized. And sometimes they simply don't yet understand the type of projects they truly want to pursue. That can create major financial pressure very quickly, because marine equipment payments don't just stop because the work slows down. One of the things experience teaches you over time is that equipment decisions are business decisions. Every decision affects risk. Every decision affects productivity. Every decision affects profitability. And many times the smartest decisions is not the biggest crane or the biggest barge, but the equipment setup that best matches the conditions and the work itself. That understanding usually only comes with years of experience, and sometimes a few painful lessons along the way. Something else people forget about equipment is that equipment is only as good as the people operating it. You can have the best crane in the world, but if the crew lacks experience, problems happen. Marine construction requires coordination, communication, timing, situational awareness, and trust me, and trust between the people working together, especially around heavy equipment on the water, because conditions can change very fast, and mistakes around heavy marine equipment can become dangerous very quickly. And as this channel continues, we're going to go much deeper into many of these topics. We'll talk about pile driving equipment, different types of barges, marine cranes, project planning, logistics, permitting, unforeseen site conditions, and many of the real-world problems contractors face during marine projects. Because there's a lot more happening behind the scenes than most people realize. Marine construction equipment is far more than machinery sitting on the water. It's a complete operating system. Every piece has its purpose. Every decision affects the project. And the people who truly understand marine construction usually understand that success often comes down to preparation, experience, and making the right equipment decisions before the job even begins. Now, before we wrap up, I also want to share some exciting news with you. In addition to the weekly episodes we're doing on this channel now, we're also going to start bringing guests onto the show. People from different parts of the marine construction industry, like engineers, material suppliers, permitting agencies, contractors, equipment specialists, and others who have real-world experience in this business. Those episodes are going to be called Dock Talk. The goal is to give you insight from multiple perspectives across the industry, not just mine. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. We got a lot of good conversations coming. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I'm Roy Benton. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.